The city hospital was always busy in the mornings. The smell of coffee mixed with hand sanitizer as nurses hurried down the halls, checking charts and answering calls, machines beeped in the background. Voices filled the air, some calm, some stressed. It was just another day of saving lives and keeping things moving. Nurse Hannah walked quickly, clipboard in hand. She had been at the hospital for only a few weeks, but already felt like she had everything under control. Her white shoes made soft squeaks on the tile floor as she moved from one room to the next. She was proud of how fast she worked and how sharp she looked in her clean uniform. But sometimes her confidence made her forget to slow down. At the far end of the hallway, room 207 had a new patient. Thomas had been brought in the night before after feeling dizzy at home. The doctors said it was nothing serious, but they wanted to keep him for observation. He was an older man, maybe in his late 70s. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and a gentle smile, even though he didn't say much. When Hannah entered his room, she barely looked at him. She glanced at his chart, wrote something down, and checked his IV line. "You'll be here for a day or two?" she said quickly, not bothering to meet his eyes. Mr. Thomas opened his mouth to say something, but Hannah was already walking out. She didn't think much of him. In her mind, he was just another quiet old man with too much time and too many questions. She had other patients, louder ones, more serious ones to deal with. Mr. Thomas didn't need much help, so she gave him as little attention as possible. To Hannah, he was just one more name on a long list. But what she didn't know, what no one had told her, was that Mr. Thomas was no ordinary patient. He had a history with the hospital that ran deeper than any file could show. And soon the truth about him would change everything. The next morning, Hannah arrived at work 10 minutes early. She liked getting a head start before the others. As she walked through the hallway, she barely noticed the quiet hum of machines or the soft moans from patients just waking up. Her first stop was room 207. Mr. Thomas. He was already sitting up in bed, waiting. The breakfast tray hadn't arrived yet. He looked toward the door when Hannah entered, his face hopeful. "Good morning," he said in a soft, polite voice. Hannah didn't return the smile. She set her clipboard down and started checking his vitals. "You're stable," she said without emotion. "Doctor will probably release you tomorrow." "That's good," Mr. Thomas replied. "This hospital, it's changed a lot since I first walked through its doors." Hannah raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. She didn't have time for small talk. "Anything else you need?" she asked flatly. "Well, the water jug's empty, and I was wondering if—" "I'll send someone in," she interrupted. "I have to move on now." She was gone before he could say thank you. Throughout the day she passed by his room several times. Each time he looked up, and each time she either ignored him or gave a short answer. To her he seemed too slow, too quiet. He didn't demand anything, but she found his questions annoying. Once he asked about a nurse who no longer worked there, someone from years ago. Hannah barely stopped to answer. Other nurses noticed how she acted and followed her lead. No one was rude, exactly. But no one was kind, either. They didn't offer warm words or stay to chat. They did what was required and left quickly. Mr. Thomas remained polite, always saying thank you, always smiling gently. But the sadness in his eyes was growing. One time he tried to share a memory. "I remember when this wing was first built. We didn't have fancy machines back then." "Uh-huh," Hannah said, writing on her chart. "That's nice." Then she walked away. Mr. Thomas sat back against his pillows. The room felt colder than it was. To Hannah he was just another bed to check off. Another task on her list. She thought of her job like a race, fast, sharp, efficient. She didn't stop to wonder who the man in room 207 truly was, or why he spoke with such care about the hospital. She didn't see the history in his eyes. Not yet, but soon she would. Later that afternoon, while most nurses were busy with medication rounds, a volunteer came into room 207. Her name was Emily, a high school student training as part of a community program. She wore a bright pink vest and a warm smile. "Hi there," she said cheerfully. "I'm Emily. I'm just here to check if you need anything." Mr. Thomas looked up from his book, surprised. Hello, dear, that's very kind of you. She walked in, straightened his blanket, and poured him a fresh cup of water. How are you feeling today? I'm doing all right, he said. This place brings back many memories. Emily tilted her head. You've been here before? Oh, many times. In fact, he paused, looking around the room. I helped build this place. A long time ago. Emily blinked. Really? You mean you worked here? He smiled. Something like that. I used to walk these halls before most of the staff were even born. Emily sat down on the chair beside his bed. That's amazing. You must know this hospital really well. I do, Mr. Thomas said gently. Every hallway, every corner. I remember when we had just a few rooms, and we all took turns doing the cleaning. Back then we treated patients with care, no matter who they were. His voice was calm, but his words held meaning. Emily listened closely, touched by how kindly he spoke. He didn't sound angry or bitter, just wise. You should talk to the nurses about this, she said. They'd probably love to hear. He chuckled softly. Maybe, but they're busy. I understand. Emily looked down for a second. She had noticed how Nurse Hannah rushed in and out without a smile. Others did the same. He's so nice, Emily told another staff member in the hallway later. Do you know who he is? The nurse shrugged. Just another patient, I guess. Emily wasn't sure. Mr. Thomas didn't seem like just another patient. He had a quiet dignity, like someone who had once been important, even if no one saw it now. Back in his room, Mr. Thomas sipped his water and looked out the window. He didn't ask for attention. But he remembered what kindness used to feel like. The next day, something unusual happened. After her volunteer shift, Emily stopped by the nurse's station. Her hands fidgeted as she looked around. Finally, she spoke up to the head nurse, Miss Rivera, a kind woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled into a bun. Excuse me, Emily said. I wanted to talk about a patient. Miss Rivera looked up. Go ahead, dear. It's Mr. Thomas. In room 207. He's really sweet, and he doesn't complain, but I don't think he's being treated very kindly. Miss Rivera raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Well, Emily said slowly, some of the nurses rush through his care. They don't really talk to him or smile. I know they're busy, but he's special. He deserves better. Miss Rivera nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Emily. I'll look into it. Later that afternoon, Miss Rivera called Hannah aside. I've received a concern about how you're treating a patient, she said gently. Hannah frowned. Who? Mr. Thomas. Hannah's face tightened. I haven't done anything wrong. I've followed all the steps. He's stable. He doesn't need much. That may be true, Miss Rivera said. But care isn't just about doing the basics, it's about how we make people feel. Every patient matters. Hannah crossed her arms. He's just an old man who talks too much. I've got real work to do. Miss Rivera's voice grew firmer. Hannah, this hospital was built on compassion. We don't rush past patients, even the quiet ones. Maybe especially the quiet ones. Hannah said nothing. She didn't think it was a big deal. After all, Mr. Thomas hadn't complained himself. But Emily's words had reached the right ears. And soon more than just a gentle warning would make Hannah see the truth. The next morning started like any other. Hannah checked her schedule and picked up her chart. She passed room 207 without stopping, planning to check in later, but just as she turned the corner, she saw something strange. Dr. Patel, one of the hospital's most respected doctors, was walking down the hallway, fast. His face looked serious, but not angry. Focused, he headed straight for Mr. Thomas's room. Hannah watched through the small window in the door. As soon as Dr. Patel entered, his whole face changed. He smiled wide and rushed to Mr. Thomas's bedside. Mr. Thomas, he said warmly. It's an honor to see you again. Mr. Thomas looked up, just as calm as ever. Hello, Ravi. I remember when you were a young intern, always spilling your coffee. Dr. Patel laughed. I can't believe you remember that. The two shook hands like old friends. Dr. Patel sat down beside the bed and spoke with such respect that it caught the attention of everyone nearby. Hannah's heart skipped a beat. What was going on? She wasn't the only one curious. Two other nurses peeked in. Whispers spread fast. A nurse finally asked Dr. Patel, "Doctor, do you know that patient personally?" Dr. Patel looked up, surprised. "You mean you don't?" The hallway grew quiet. "That man," Dr. Patel said, "is Mr. Harold Thomas. He's the founder of this hospital. He built it over 40 years ago, with his own money. After his wife died from poor care at another hospital, he promised to create a place where every patient would be treated with dignity." Hannah felt her stomach twist. Dr. Patel continued. "He was the first to scrub into surgery here. He spent years helping people who couldn't pay. He trained half the doctors you work with. He's the reason we're all standing here today." The nurses were silent. No one had known. Hannah leaned against the wall, her face warm with shame. Every cold word, every rushed visit, she remembered it all, and now she knew the truth. The man she had ignored, brushed off and thought of as a burden, was a hero, a builder, a caretaker, the very heart of the hospital. Inside room 207, Mr. Thomas just smiled. He didn't look angry. He didn't act proud. He was still the same quiet man, but now his story was no longer hidden. And for Hannah, everything had changed. That night, long after most of the staff had gone home, Hannah sat alone in the break room. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her eyes were fixed on the floor. She wasn't thinking about charts or checklists now. She was thinking about him, Mr. Thomas. She had barely said more than a few words to him, and the words she did say weren't kind. They were short, cold, and empty. Now she knew the truth. He wasn't just some old man. He had started it all. The beds, the nurse's station, the emergency room, even the break room she was sitting in, none of it would exist without him. She had treated him like he didn't matter. Her chest felt tight. She thought about how gently he had spoken, even when she had brushed him off. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't complained. He just smiled, even when people didn't smile back. Hannah slowly stood up and walked out into the hallway. The lights were dim for the night shift, but everything was quiet and still. She walked toward the wall where the hospital's history was displayed. There, behind a piece of glass, was a large photo. It was Mr. Thomas. Much younger, standing in front of the hospital during its opening day. Next to the photo was a plaque, Harold Thomas, founder. He believed every patient deserved kindness, no matter who they were. Hannah stared at it for a long time. Her throat felt tight. All day she had worked with his name on her chart and hadn't even seen him for who he really was. How could she have missed something so important? She had been proud of how fast she worked, how focused she was, but now that pride felt small. That night, Hannah made a quiet promise to herself. Tomorrow would be different. She would do more than just her job. She would start caring, really caring. The next morning, before her shift officially started, Hannah stood outside room 207, holding a small bouquet of fresh flowers. Her hands trembled a little. She had barely slept. All night she had replayed her actions in her mind. The rushed visits, the cold voice, the missed chances. Now she wanted to make it right. She knocked softly, then stepped inside. Mr. Thomas was sitting up in bed, reading the newspaper. He looked up, surprised to see her. "Good morning," he said kindly, just as he always did. Hannah stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Mr. Thomas, I wanted to say something." He folded the newspaper and set it on the table. "I haven't treated you the way I should have," Hannah said, her voice trembling. "I was in such a rush, I didn't stop to see who you really were. I didn't listen, and I didn't show respect." She looked down, then held out the flowers. "I'm sorry, truly." Mr. Thomas looked at her for a moment. Then slowly he smiled. "You don't have to bring flowers to say sorry," he said softly. "But thank you. I just feel awful," Hannah said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "We all make mistakes," he said, his voice calm and kind. "What matters is what we do after." Hannah nodded slowly. I want to do better. Mr. Thomas reached out and patted her hand. You already have, he said. It takes courage to apologize. That's what real care looks like. At that moment, something inside Hannah changed, not just in her job, but in her heart. Mr. Thomas had every reason to be angry. But instead, he chose grace. From that day on, Hannah was different. She still moved quickly through her rounds, still checked charts and gave medicine. But now she looked her patients in the eyes. She smiled more, she asked how they were feeling, and really listened to their answers. Her heart wasn't just focused on the work anymore. It was focused on the people. In room 207, she spent extra time with Mr. Thomas. Sometimes, she brought him tea instead of water. Sometimes they just talked. He told her stories about the early days of the hospital, how they had only a few beds, how doctors worked long hours without pay, and how kindness always came first. One afternoon, she asked, "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" Mr. Thomas smiled. "Because I wanted to see if the heart of the hospital was still here." Hannah understood what he meant. At the end of the week, Mr. Thomas was cleared to go home. Staff gathered to say goodbye, more people than anyone expected. Doctors, nurses, even hospital cleaners came to shake his hand. Some gave hugs, others just said, "Thank you." When it was Hannah's turn, she gave him a soft smile and a warm hug. "Thank you for teaching me," she whispered. He nodded. Never stop seeing people for who they are. As he left in a wheelchair, pushed by a young volunteer, Hannah watched until he disappeared around the corner. The hospital felt different now. Warmer, brighter, not because the walls had changed, but because she had. And now, whenever she walked past room 207, she didn't see just a number on the door. She remembered a quiet man, with gentle eyes. A man who reminded her what true care really means. Weeks passed after Mr. Thomas left the hospital, but his presence lingered in the air. For the staff, things had changed, not just the way they worked, but how they saw their work. Hannah especially, was different. Every morning, she took a moment before she entered any room to think about the people inside. She no longer rushed through her duties, checking tasks off a list. She paid attention. She looked for the small things, the smile that wasn't there, the nervous hands that needed reassurance, the quiet souls who just needed someone to care. On the walls of the hospital, the plaque honoring Mr. Thomas was polished every week. Staff passed it by with a new respect. Nurses, doctors, even the volunteers, spoke of him often, sharing stories of his vision, his kindness, and his commitment. They understood now that this hospital wasn't just a building. It was a place built on the idea that every patient, no matter their age, no matter their story, mattered. One afternoon, a nurse found a letter on her desk. It was from the family of a patient who had passed away. The letter spoke of how the hospital, especially the staff, had treated their loved one with dignity and care in their final days. "We didn't know how much that kindness meant," the letter read. "It's because of people like Mr. Thomas and the heart of this place that we were able to say goodbye with peace." When Hannah read the letter, she felt a lump in her throat. She placed it on the bulletin board for everyone to see. She had learned what it meant to care, not just for the body, but for the spirit. She had learned that sometimes, the smallest moments, like stopping to smile, like saying a kind word, are the moments that matter the most. One evening, as Hannah walked past room 207 again, she paused. The door was empty now. But in her mind, Mr. Thomas's quiet smile remained. He had left behind more than just a hospital. He had left a legacy of care. And it was one that would be remembered. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of kindness, please take a moment to share your thoughts. Like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected with more stories that inspire and encourage empathy. Your support helps us continue sharing meaningful narratives that make a difference. Thank you for being a part of this journey.